You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, a podcast all about shedding our limiting labels and beliefs. And why do we do that? So we can actually live more fully into who we were created to be and shine our lights in the world. This week, we are joined by Patti James. Patti has been coaching people from all walks of life in one-on-one and group situations for over 18 years. And she currently has 3 distinct coaching practices. And they focus on different areas, although because she's so adept, she can blend, but she focuses on business growth, finances, and most recently, and why I asked her to be on the podcast, is her focus on the Enneagram. Patti has a passion for personal growth, and she says her love of learning has allowed her to graduate Cum Laude from the University of Colorado at Denver, and that led her to create her own university, Patti Breton University. Well, I'm going to ask her to talk about that and also to correct my pronunciation. But on a personal note, Patti just celebrated 6 years of marriage with her husband, Neil, and they have a 3-year-old daughter, Scarlett. And they currently live in Denver, so it's still chilly there this time of year as we're recording this. And when time allows, you're going to find Patti either running, wine tasting, or doing escape rooms. And she says sometimes she does all 3 in the same day. I'd be curious the sequence of all of that. Anyway, in our conversation today, I'm going to ask Patti to talk a little more about PBU, her university, her experiences with the Enneagram, especially as a type 3 with a wing 2, married to a type 5, and why becoming clear on what we each need is so important. So with that, let's welcome our guest today, Patti James. How are you, Patti?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, for allowing me to be part of this podcast. As I said earlier, I love what your podcast represents and the message that you're getting out there. So I am absolutely thrilled and honored that I get to be part of it. So
well, I'm glad. And I have to do a little self-disclosure here because, you know, one of the things that troubles me, I would say bugs me, but it just troubles me more than anything, I think, is for people who are trying to do new things in life and kind of stretch themselves. If we look to like social media and whatever is out there, quote unquote, on the web, it can look so like, oh, they got there, it was so easy, or they've got skills I don't have. So this is actually my second take with Patti. So last week, I scheduled Patti to be here on Friday, which is typically when I record. But however, and we had a really great interview. And then at the end of it, when I'm closing down, my normal thing is I have check marks and all of a sudden I'm not getting the thing that I actually hit record. So first I was mortified. And then I thought, oh, well, that was such a great interview. I've got to own it with Patti. I can't just tell her I didn't like it and not use it. So we are back today. Patti's very gracious. And the great thing is a weekend has passed and neither one of us actually remembers what we've talked about in great detail. So it's going to feel fresh again.
Yes.
So yeah. Patti, yeah.
I appreciate you saying that because, you know, I think people oftentimes, especially on social media, think everything is, like you said, is perfect. And it's not. We all make mistakes and it's that's okay. That's part of learning and that's part of life. So that's a good thing.
Well, for me, it helps me to just laugh at myself a little because I tend to be a little serious about stuff. And so I'm thinking, that was kind of a bonehead mistake. And when I told my husband I did, he goes, you never do that. And I go, evidently I do now. So anyway, the first time we talked, I asked you this, and feel free to change your answer. But is there something you do every day that really keeps you focused and grounded in your true purpose and calling, Patti?
Yeah. And I really think that it is twofold. One is every single morning as I'm taking my daughter to daycare, we pray. And in that prayer, I say out loud 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I try to have a back and forth with my 3-year-old. So I'll say, this is what I'm grateful for. What are you grateful for, Scarlett? And it's amazing because it's so great to be able to see through her innocent eyes of things that she's grateful for. And it's hilarious, some of the things she comes up with. But being grounded in gratitude at the beginning of the day, I think is so important for me, at least, to start my day with looking at the things that not necessarily I wish that I had or that I, aspire to be, but just things that I currently have that I am absolutely grateful for. But the second part to this is the intentions that I want to have for the day. One of my coaches that I had several years ago, her name is Fee Mazanke. She talks about the boomerang effect, and what you throw out in the world is going to come back to you. And so every single day I try to set 1 to 3 intentions that I'd like to have for that day. And when I'm at my best, I'll journal those when I get home because I love checking them off. It's almost eerie at the end of the day when I get to say, oh my gosh, like every single one of these intentions happened. And just for fun, sometimes I make them very specific. Like I'm going to have somebody who I haven't spoke with in a long time reach out to me. And then an hour later, I have someone who I haven't talked to for years send me a text. And it's a little eerie how specific those intentions can be. But saying things I'm grateful for and then making intentions for the day, I think really helped me live true to my calling, as you had said.
Well, and I love that boomerang analogy, right? Because what we do put out, for good or ill, and that's, it's like what we think about, we just manifest. I listened to a great podcast yesterday, and it just went deeper into that, both from a psychological, but also a spiritual perspective of really, you choose what you feed, right? Do you feed your fear or do you feed your faith and confidence, right? Just pick, right? So if my intention today is to feed the positive messages or put things out, and when you said that people will do that, I did that not long ago. I thought, I need to hear from, and it was one of them was my sister, one of my sisters, I've got a couple, and the other was that I needed to hear from this other person. And with, just like you said, and my sister and I are like close, man. She will call or text me and going, hey, just thinking about, going, oh, that works so great. So
it gives you chills sometimes because you're like,
it does.
This is crazy.
And I think it's reversed too, because there'll be times where I'm doing, like, I could be doing this and all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got to reach out, right? I was just thinking about calling you. So, right. And she goes, I just started thinking about I should call you. So anyway, I love that too. But I do think that intentionality, because it brings our awareness to what it is we're trying to accomplish and be present in the world. So I do want to back you up a minute. Talk a little bit about PBU. What inspired you to create your own university? You've just finished school. You came out with top honors and grades, and now you have a university. What's up?
Yeah. It was actually quite a while after I graduated, but I kept having all these like one day-isms, right? Like one day I'd like to learn how to do this, and one day I'd like to learn how to do that. And I was on an airplane, and I just remember this so distinctly because it was just like this tidal wave of like, oh, I got to get this done now. But I was on an airplane to a conference with my old company, Cutco. I was a district manager for them. And I was reading a book called Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. And in that book, it was like the 3rd page of the book, but it said something like, we are completely surrounded by anything that we want to learn, information we want. We can Google it, right? We can get it so easily. And I remember just thinking, I shut the book and I got out my journal. I'm a huge journaler. And I was like, why am I waiting to learn, all these things that I have one day-isms? What? And I started journaling to myself to kind of break this down. And I thought, there's all these things I want to learn. So what's holding me back? And I was like, a plan. And I was like, I was a really good student. So why can't I just plan it out like school? And so in that, I wrote down all the different things that I'd like to learn. And so essentially, I started making my own classes, like my own set class, where it was a non-negotiable. So if somebody called me up and said, I would like to do something this time, I said, hey, I'm sorry, I have class, just like if it was an actual class. the big thing that made PBU, in my opinion, better than something that you really wanted to, just go after is the accountability I set up in place. Now, the whole reason why school works is because you have midterms, you have finals, you have somebody who's holding you accountable and going to be grading you. So what I created is I just used my friends and my coworkers as that accountability. So I planned out my semester and I said, okay, my final is going to be this. So I would ask my friend, hey, I'm going to tell you a book report, or I'm going to play you a song on my guitar because that's my class I'm taking, or I'm going to teach you how to do Zumba, or whatever it is that I was learning that semester. I set a date, I partnered a friend with it, and that way I could be able to make that happen. And so what was so nice about PBU is I don't have to pay a university to continue to learn. I strongly believe that we all should continue to be students of life. And just because you're out of a college or high school or any doctorate, like you can still learn. And that's allows us to be so much more passionate and excited about life when we're constantly learning and growing. That's why I love your podcast. But having those accountability and just having it as a set structure is something that I really love about PBU. And I've been talking about that concept since 2000. I think I made it in 2011 or 2012. So I have t-shirts and everything that my sister and brother-in-law made me that say PBU, so people ask me at the airport, like, PBU, where's that? I'm like, well, it's not technically not any place, but anyway, so that's what Patti Breton University is all about, is just being a student of life and making sure that there is a set place, a set time, because if we don't put it in our schedule, it's not going to happen, and a set deadline of when we're going to make that happen.
And being able to say, I have class, right? That's no one ever, when you're going to school and you say, I have class, they don't say, oh, why don't you just cut and have coffee with me? It's like, you wouldn't think of it. You just wouldn't. Person's on a journey, right? Let them do their thing. But so that just makes it so clear. And I think it's so self-affirming to say, I've set this up, I have class, and I'm going to do this. So yeah. I just love that concept. I really do. Well, let's pivot over to the Enneagram. Now, you've done other learning types over the years, and I know through we talked a little bit about your Cutco experience, and that's a very structured organization where they want their folks to be knowledgeable and skillful and trained and all of that. So talk a little bit about when you learned about the Enneagram, how that helped you, where that was in your journey, and then kind of how it evolved into what you're doing now.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that Cutco really did was instilled in me personal growth and the importance of the more you personally grow, the better your business is going to do. There's nobody that I know that can elevate their business without personally growing first. And so that's something that I saw hand in hand for the 10 years I was a district manager, is that every time that I really took advantage of my personal growth, my business would all of a sudden be doing better. And I mean, just to name some of them, like some of the personality systems I've studied is LIFO, the 5 love languages, Berkman, Skills Finder. I went through the Landmark Forum, Myers-Briggs, something called CVI was really big in Cutco, or Core Value Index. And these were all great. And they really allowed me to learn a lot about myself and learn a lot about the people I was working with and my friends and family. But my best friend and a coworker were telling me a little bit about the Enneagram. And I was like, all right, yeah, just another personality system, yada, yada. And my husband had deployed in 2020. I was at home. I had a 1-year-old. I'm working my 2 businesses. And, the world shut down. So I'm trying to manage a 1-year-old while working 2 businesses at home. And I said, now sounds like a great time to really start studying something else, the total 3 in me. And I said, I've heard a little bit about this Enneagram thing. Let me read a book. And so I read the book, The Paths Between Us, which I think is a great book. Usually The Road Back to You is typically number 1, and then The Paths Between Us. I did it the opposite way. But really what sparked my interest was reading my husband's chapter, learning about the 5. I had him take it, and I can't remember if he did get the 5 right off the bat, But as soon as I read that chapter about him, there were so many light bulbs that just went off that I said, oh my gosh, this is Neil. Oh my goodness, this makes so much more sense. Because with a 5, as you know, since you're a 5, there are so many things that a 5 will do without really thinking about it. But as a 3 with a strong wing too, I can take a lot of things really personally. And so there was at times in our marriage where he would do something, but now, like looking at it through the Enneagram lens, he just needed space, he needed to recharge. But for me, I took it as like, oh man, is he mad at me? Or, what did I say? Like, what did I do? And I would take all these things or create all these ideas in my mind. So researching the 5 a ton really got me into the Enneagram. And then, I was like, okay, what about the 3? And so I started researching that. And then I started researching all the different numbers and started partnering up different people. And early on, I just kind of would observe people through this new lens of the Enneagram. So I know one of the people I work with, who's technically my boss, he's an 8. And so just watching his interactions, knowing from my perspective that he's an 8. But then there's other individuals who I knew, oh, they're a 3 or they're a 1. And it's just so interesting the differences you see and what you pick up on knowing somebody's Enneagram number. Specifically now that I'm coaching, I coach a lot of people. I coach 80 to 100 people. So being able to view through the lens of, ooh, this person is a 7 and they're not in a great spot. And I could tell that because they're doing X, Y, and Z. So it's been a really exciting journey. A lot of it being passive at first and just like getting as much knowledge as I could about the Enneagram. But now I'm teaching people, I'm doing workshops, I'm talking to anybody that will listen to me about the Enneagram and telling them about their Enneagram. So it's been really, really great. It's a really great journey.
Okay, so you threw out a couple of numbers, and for folks who may not yet know their number, I've got a couple questions for you. Describe a little bit more about your own type, like, and not just like the basics, because there's that tendency like, oh, I know her type, right? We make assumptions, right? So what are a couple of the things unique about you as a 3? And maybe how you would show up when you're not doing your best, right? Like you're not at your optimum self. So someone might be observing you, and on one day or one situation within the same day, you're exhibiting certain things. And they're going, Patti seems a bit off. So give us the high level overview, some of your motivations, and some of the challenges when you start going down in level.
Yeah, I love talking about this. And I will say, if you don't know your type and you're listening to this, take a couple of tests. I found for me, and at least for a few others that I spoke to, that when you start feeling uncomfortable, when you hear some of the things that you're doing when you're not at your best, or when you kind of feel a little embarrassed, that's probably a really good sign that's your number, right? So when I first took the test, I got labeled as an 8, which is the challenger. And in my opinion, I love 8s and I totally want to be an 8. But as I was researching the 8, I was like, yeah, this isn't me. When I read the 3, which I'll get into here in a moment, there was some things that I was like, okay, yeah, I can go with that. But then when they were talking about some of the things they do that isn't when they're not at their best, I was like, no, oh no. And I didn't want to read it. I almost wanted to shut my eyes and deny. But then sitting with it for a little while, I was like, yeah, this is me, but this is good for me to know and be aware of. So the 3, they're the achiever. And as an achiever, getting things done or being successful or being accomplished in any way is probably one of the most important things to a 3. So because of this, I am constantly adding new things that I could achieve or get done to my plate. So last year, for example, being certified as an Enneagram coach, running 500 miles was a big goal for me. I had a couple other big goals. So I could just be able to say, yes, I did this. The bad part about that is that no matter how that goal is serving me, I have to get it done. Like, I know other types can set a goal, and if they're not really feeling it anymore, they can just kind of set it aside. But if I set a goal, I'm going to kill myself to try to get this done as well as I can. There's no way I'm going to give up on a goal. So I remember reading, I had a goal of reading a certain amount of books. And one of the books I started, I absolutely despised. I was like 3 chapters in, and I did not like the book at all, but I had to finish it because I had to get done with this goal, and I couldn't leave a book undone. So as far as a 3 goes, I mean, they are, one of the positive qualities about a 3 is they can get so many different things done. If you want to get something done, give it to a 3. If you want to be able to have new ideas or just something to get done, give it to a 3. But when a 3 is in a bad space, when all of a sudden the super motivated person doesn't really seem motivated or excited about anything. And they're just kind of like, yeah, okay, I can get that done, or meh, I don't really care about that anymore. That they're probably, what I like to say, is unaligned. So we're all in alignment. That's when we're at our best. We're on autopilot. That's when we're just kind of reacting. And then when we're unaligned, that's when we're stressed or out of growth. And typically with a 3, you can tell that when they just don't really have goals and they don't really want to go after anything. Now, when a 3 is really just an autopilot, one of the dangerous parts is that they could be the workaholic of the Enneagram. And so my husband pointed this out to me early in our marriage. He's like, why are you working? Like, you don't have to be working this much. He's like, why are you working so much? And I was like, I just want to get X, Y, and Z done. I need to get it accomplished. And for him, he's a 5, which is the investigative thinker. He wants to limit his resources of what he puts out. So sometimes he still can't understand how much energy I put into something because I want to get it done and I want to be the best at it. He just can't understand, like, well, that's not going to give you X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, yes, but I could say I did it and I'm the best at it. And that is something that we're still we vibe most of the time on most things, but that is one thing that we are still off a little bit on. We are not quite on the same wavelength. But now that he understands my Enneagram a little bit more, he can understand or be a little bit more gracious with giving me space to do that.
Well, and in defense of 5s, no, I'm not going to defend a 5 because I have my own cringeworthy awareness as a 5. But with that, it's so great to be someone that you can hand things to and know there's such self-satisfaction that people can trust you as a 3, that you're energetic. You can actually engage people in ideas that they may have been a little less willing to dive in on, but because of your enthusiasm, because that people can rely on you, you can get people to do things that they might have said, well, maybe later, right? And they're going, yeah, I'm all in. If Patty's leading it, I'm with her, right? You get followers as a 3.
I would 100% agree with that. Yeah. Now, one of the other, bad traits of a 3 is we have so much that we're adding to our plate and we want to just get it done, that oftentimes I know personally, I'll get things done and they weren't quite the quality that I would have wanted in that, just because I'm just trying, I have this to get done and I have 10 other things that I want to get accomplished and checked off today. So let me just get this done as quick as I can. And so sometimes that can show through in some of the work that I do. But on the other end of the spectrum, I'm able to highlight all the things that I got accomplished that day. So a 1, which is the perfectionist, would absolutely, if I have a few 1s in my life, so they know, they're like, oh, this wasn't done. This needs to be redone. And I appreciate that because it's nice to go back and fix it to the perfectionist standard if I need to. But there's other things that I don't really care if it's not done at the absolute peak best way it needs to be done. Like, I don't need to have my color coordinated closets. I don't need to have, the sticker ripped off perfectly off of like, something I purchased. There's just some things I could care less about that the perfectionist I know would be like, oh my gosh, this is giving me a twitch in my eye. But I guess we pick and choose things that are important to us, right? Especially.
Well, we do. As you're saying that, I'm thinking with your long list, I can just imagine asking you, and this is what's great about you setting intention, right? Because that is a very seemingly passive way of getting you to focus on what's important, right? Because if something came up, you could use your intention as a filter to say, really, I've got 10 things on my list, but what do I need? What's essential here?
Yes.
And yes, it's going to feel great checking that box, but today it might not happen. Does that make your stomach just a little sick, though, to think that you couldn't check that box?
Oh, yes, it does. So there's some times where, my husband and I will be getting ready for bed, and I'm like, I just need to do one more thing. I'll be right back. And he's just like, I think at this point he's kind of used to it. Or I'm like running around because I need to close my rings on my Apple Watch or whatever it might be. So he's I think he finds it endearing now, but at first he didn't really understand it so much.
Yeah, I can see I'm feeling for a different type. And some types really are like oil and vinegar. I mean, unless if they know and understand each other, not necessarily so. And that's why it's so important at work to understand and recognize. And I love that you use the word lenses, right? Because it really is. I'm wearing my computer glasses, right? Well, they see at a certain distance. I forget to take them off and I go out in the other room and I'm trying to read a letter. I can't read it. It's too close. And so it's kind of fuzzy. I'm thinking, what's wrong? But I didn't realize I hadn't changed my lenses. So for me, it's kind of like if you and I were working on something and you're coming out of left field and I think, what's up with Patti? And I forget that you see things from a totally different point of view and I need to take a step back and go, what can I appreciate and learn here? Or if I know you well and you're kind of falling off into that, like the not so stellar part of your personality or your functioning part, be able to say, hey, Patti, what's happening? But you wouldn't do that without someone's permission.
Right. Especially when coaching somebody. But yeah, I find it so interesting to learn about the different levels of alignment for every type. And it's so helpful, especially for the people you know really well and for the people you work with closely to know, this is where they go to when they are in growth. And here's where they go to in stress. And here's where they go to when they're on autopilot. One of the things I did not say about the three is that at the best, threes are, instead of being competitive and trying to win and trying to be the best, they turn into more of a team player and where they're being more cooperative versus competitive. And they're trying to get other people to win just as much as them. And so I know I'm in a really great spot when I'm cheering for other people and really happy for their success versus like, how can I beat this person in the game of life, right? So that is, for a three, that's really important to be aware of is like when I'm wanting to, support other people and cooperate with them versus just like thinking about in what ways I could beat them. That's really important to know.
It's interesting. I know a three who I really admire her. I mean, she's a very accomplished businesswoman. And, we were having a conversation, but one of her non-negotiables as she goes forward in life is really that I want to be able to collaborate with people, right? So really on the high side of a three, right? And she says, if I can't do that, then it's probably not where I need to be.
Yes.
Versus I have to be the king bee or queen bee, I guess. So anyway, the more you know about the Enneagram, the more you can just love on the different types.
Yes. And one of the things I didn't mention, Sarah, that I love about the Enneagram compared to these other types that compared to these other personality systems that I've studied is the Enneagram is so complex, right? So like with Myers-Briggs, that's a great personality test. There's nothing wrong with it. But with the Enneagram, there are layers. So there's where you're at when you're in stress, in autopilot, in growth, but then there's also your wing, and then there's your tri-type, and then there's your subtypes, and then it just keeps going on and on and on. And what's so great is that people just at the tip of the iceberg, when they learn about their number, they're like, oh, this describes me so well. And I'm like, just wait till we dive in, because you'll be able to learn so much more about yourself, your husband, other individuals, if you want to dive in. But if you want to just know the surface level, that's okay too. But man, I have been blown away at all the different layers of the Enneagram.
And it does, like you're saying, you do keep unpeeling. The more you know, the more, and it really does begin with self, right? You don't just to get to analyze other people. It matters that we do our own work on the Enneagram. You do say that gaining clarity about ourselves is super important. Will you give an example of where you've seen that happen with one of your clients, where they had one of those aha moments, and then what changed for him or her?
Yes, 100%. So I have two examples, and one individual I coach, he's a 7, which is known as the enthusiast. Just as an overall view, they're like the most fun on the Enneagram. They also are the visionaries. So they basically, they love to have things to look forward to, whether that's a vision of what their life could look like or what their business could look like. And when they are in stress, they take on one's stress qualities, which looks like them imposing restrictions on themselves, saying, I should have done this and I should have done that. I have to stop doing this. So that way they can get more productivity. So I was talking to this individual who's a 7, and I could totally tell that he was in this one space, because he's like, oh, I got to stop doing this. I got to start doing this, and I have to do this. And I just kind of stopped him. And I knew that he was a 7. He's kind of he's learned a little bit about the 7. He knows the tip of the iceberg. And I just asked him, when's the last time you had fun? And he thought for a second and said, it's been a long time. And I said, as a 7, one of the most important things for you is to make sure that you're enjoying life, like experiences are something that you really want. But secondly, make sure you have something you look forward to. So I want you to text a few of your friends right now and plan something so you have something to look forward to. So we just took a second so he could do that. And as soon as he got done texting his friends to plan something that he had to look forward to, you could hear and you could see the shift. Oh, wow, I feel a whole lot better. So, and I said, hey, as a 7, this is something that's really important to you. So just keep that in mind when you start when you start saying that you have to stop doing this or start doing this, and you're really trying to bear down and make yourself so restricted, just realize you need to have more fun. That is so important to you. Now, the other person that I can think of, she's a 2, and I was talking with her, and this, the specific aspect of the call has nothing to do with personal growth, but I could just kind of hear this tightness in her voice, and I could just kind of feel some not so great energy. And I said, hey, are you feeling a little overwhelmed right now? And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm taking on so many people's emotions, and everybody's coming to me and asking me for all these things. Now, her number is a 2. That's the helper. And the helper will give and give and give until they have nothing left. And then they'll give some more, and they feel completely drained. And a 2, they are known as the trusted advisor because they listen, they have great insight for people, and they instinctively know what other people want without, sometimes that person doesn't even know what they want. They already know what they want for them. And they'll be like, wow, you know me so well. The trusted advisor is the type of person that when you're talking to them, you're like, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I'm telling you this because I just feel so comfortable with you. So anyway, the trusted advisor doesn't know how to say no often. So this individual I was coaching, she was saying yes to everybody who would ask her for something. And she was giving. And she was just at her breaking point where she's like, I'm taking on other people's emotions. I'm giving to everybody else. And so I said, hey, this is what you are in the Enneagram. And here's where you're at. You're completely unaligned because you're giving without filling up your cup first. So here's what I'm going to have you do. I need you to plan in an hour in your schedule today where you're going to shut off your phone, go out in nature, like get away from everybody and just take an hour to yourself. And we've had a couple of conversations where she had told me that she may have felt selfish doing that previously. And I assured her that wasn't, but just giving her that permission to take that and just being more aware of what a 2 does and some of her pitfalls that can lead her into unalignment really made a big difference. So when I spoke with her, and by the way, she felt like instantaneously better after she already knew she was going to have some time for herself, and she was learning how to put herself first without feeling selfish. Later on, a couple of coaching calls later, she started setting boundaries for herself. We practiced how to say no to people and said, hey, I would love to help you, but first I need to do this. And then you need to do this first. I'm not going to do everything for you. So learning how to set those boundaries and set it up so she's just not doing everything for everybody. And that was a huge deal, but she wouldn't have known that unless she learned a little bit more about her type. And she was completely amazed when she learned about the 2 and said, oh my gosh, I'm so glad, you taught me this. I'm so glad I learned more about this because this is exactly what I needed.
It occurs to me in both of those instances, the one thing you did identical for both of them was give them permission.
Yes.
And I wonder, in your experience, and then I just wonder generally for our listeners. So if you're listening and you have thoughts on this, we would love for you to type comments in or email either Patti or I with your thoughts on it. But to what degree, especially in a coaching relationship, are people waiting for permission because somewhere it's just hard to give it to themselves?
Yeah. I feel like that would be more likely in the heart triad, even though I did use a 7, in the heart triad, which includes 2, 3s, and 4s, because they have the problem with their identity. I feel like they need a lot of permission from what I've seen. Like 3s need permission to take time off. 2s need permission to, say no. And like 4s probably need permission to say it's okay to, have all their deep emotions that they do have. But I would imagine that for a lot of the head triad, with exception of the 7, I don't know, maybe they all do need permission, but I feel like a 5 would be like, I'm out. I need time to myself. I don't need permission to do anything. But that's interesting. But I think that's one of the reasons that it's so helpful to have a coach of your own to guide you through what you do need, whether it's you need permission or you need to look at other people through a different lens. Because I know a handful of 8s, and 8s, which is the challenger, they don't need permission at all, right? But oftentimes they forget that other people don't see things as raw or quick as they do. So that's a really interesting question. I'm sure we all probably need permission for something.
I found it, and I would say for me as a 5, one of my coaches, so for folks, one of the challenges for a 5 is that we have this thing that we like to be competent. We want to know that we can take care of business for ourselves, for others. So it is really, and in addition to the fact that we don't like being overwhelmed with whatever, right? We're time hogs, basically, which is not our best piece. However, but one of the things she did for me was she said, well, what are you going to do to relax, right? You've been busy, you do the business thing, yada, yada. And I said, well, we're planning to take a week. She goes, well, what week are you taking off? And when I first had this conversation, it was the end of 2019. And she goes, so what week are you taking off? And I said, well, we don't know. At that point, I had a relative in the hospital we were caring for. And she goes, what week would you like to take off? And I went, she was relentless, but super nice, right? So I'm not feeling the need to push back. She's just like, I hear you, but when would you have liked to have gone? She goes, good, write that on your calendar and block it out now. And she goes, now go, how many weeks total would you like off? I said, well, I'd like to do one more of those, right? She goes, block it off now. Next time I talk to you, I want to know the dates. And honest to goodness, doing that, I ended up taking a little more that year, but the next year, and we had to cancel. We had things come up that were out of our control. Hello, COVID. But also family things that came up we needed to attend to. But because I had done that, I could let them go. I didn't have to figure out how to squeeze them in, which really for me was saying it's okay to have your own needs and wants, right? And to book them. And so this year, I work with her on another focus area this year. We keep switching the focus areas. She says, so how'd you do last year on your vacation? I said, oh, I took it all. And plus I added some. And she goes, what's the plan for this year? I said, oh, I've added more. And because I can work location independent, so I could do this podcast from anywhere as long as I have a Wi-Fi, right? So I think that piece, to your point of the head triad, I do think we all, I'm not, maybe permission's the wrong word, but it's kind of like the okay, you're not asking too much. Or for someone in the feeling triad, you're not being selfish if you're not always present. Or for someone in the more action gut triad, being able to say, you don't have to handle it for everybody else. It's okay for them to figure it out. You can take a break, even if it's for an hour, and let them try and muddle through, right? And then they might have a genius idea and you could go, oh, that was so great. Because it's a lot of weight to feel like you have to make sure everything works for everybody.
Yes.
So that's what I pay attention to that for a while, Patti, and then let's reconnect on it, because I'd be really interested to know like what you hear from people that might be a subtle way of them asking, quote unquote, for permission, or like, okay, I could do this. It's okay.
Yes. No, everything you had said, I could completely hear my husband saying that about the vacation. So that's, I never even really thought about that, but yeah, instead of like, yeah, we're going to take some time off, and then it never happens unless
loosey goosey.
Slide it in. Yeah. That's a really great point. Thank you so much, Sarah. I will most certainly keep that on my radar, especially when I'm talking with people.
Well, I'll give credit to Marina Ridge, who made me do it and continues to make me go, what's your plan? I don't know. She goes, just put it on your calendar. But it is true. It does help. It helps me. And it also, for my husband, who wants to know that I have a plan to take time and I'm not going to work all the time because I love my work. He can look at my calendar and go, where are we going? I says, we haven't decided, but we're going somewhere. Right?
We're going to figure it out.
We'll go camping somewhere. I don't know, but we'll go. So anyway, okay. I can imagine there are folks listening who are going, I want to connect up with Patti. I think I want to find out about coaching with her, learning more with her. How do people connect with you, Patti?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have a website quite yet, but I am on all the social media handles. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Coach with Patti on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. You're also going to email me. The email is pretty easy, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be posted as well. But it's coachwithpatti@gmail, Patti with the I, gmail.com. So there's a lot of different places that people can be able to reach out and be able to see. I do post, I would say at least twice a month on my Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn about Enneagram things, whether it's a portion of a workshop I did, or I created a one-page PDF of basically all the 9 types and their core motivation, their core fear, their core weakness, and core logging as like just an overview for you to look at. So it's color coordinated for those of you who are ones, and the perfectionists, you'll really appreciate that. So anyway, but yeah, I post them instead of a website. I post it on all the different social media handles, so you can find me there.
We will have it there. So, and so folks listening, just go to the show notes. There'll be links there for you. Patti, as we wrap this up, is there one word of encouragement or advice that you would like to offer our listeners?
Yeah. So going back to the whole reason for this podcast, Sarah's interviewing different Enneagram types. And what's so interesting is that as you dive into your Enneagram, I would just say write down the 5 people closest to you. And if you've not learned a whole lot about the Enneagram, find out what their Enneagram number is and find out what yours is, obviously, and just read a little bit about those. And you'll be blown away at how much you could really learn about them. And if we can just know a little bit more about each other, man, what a much better world this could be, right? I will tell you, my husband and I, before I researched the Enneagram, we would be on the same wavelength mostly on most things. But once I really understood his Enneagram type, I would say it changed our marriage. It transformed our marriage, and it can be a transformational tool for you as well. So it's not really a piece of advice, as more of a call to action to look into the Enneagram. And if you want to know more, message me, message Sarah. We would love to explore more about the Enneagram and be able to coach you through it.
So as a true 3, that was a great checkbox with the call to action, Patti. Yay. My hat's off to you. Hey, and listeners, I'm serious. Check out the show notes. Reach out to Patti. As you can tell from the interview, from her voice, she does love the Enneagram. But Patti, you know what really comes through to me in our conversation is how sincere you are and how much you love helping other people. And that to me is just such a gift. And I feel grateful I get to start my Monday morning off with a redo of my failed recording podcast, but I think it was even better today. So
yeah, I would agree. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's definitely a passion helping others, and that's why I can't get enough of it. And so sometimes my husband's like, "Are you ever going to stop working?" And I just keep scheduling more calls just because I love seeing people's transformation. So thank you so much again for just chatting with me. I really enjoyed your energy and your time, and I absolutely love this podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Patti.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.